The desert never sleeps, and neither did Sergeant Michael Cole. For 48 hours straight, his eyes had fought against the darkness that tried to swallow him whole. The war had stripped him of everything: rest, safety, even the simple peace of closing his eyes without fear. He once thought he understood exhaustion. But this was something deeper. It wasn't just tiredness of the body. It was the kind that seeps into your bones, makes you forget what day it is, and blurs the line between what's real and what's not. It all began on the 12th day of their mission, a simple recon run that turned into a nightmare. The radio had gone silent hours ago, and every sound outside the broken walls felt like a threat. Michael's squad had been ambushed, scattered, and only 3 remained: him, Corporal Davis, and Private Lee. They hadn't slept for 2 nights. Not because they didn't want to, but because closing your eyes meant dying. 2 more hours, Michael whispered, though he didn't know who he was saying it to. His voice cracked, the words dragging out like sand. He looked over at Davis, who was trying to stay awake by humming quietly. Lee sat in the corner, staring blankly, his rifle trembling in his hands. None of them spoke about it, but they all knew the enemy was still out there, hunting. The first night had been filled with gunfire. The second, with silence. The kind of silence that plays tricks on your mind, makes you think you hear footsteps where there are none. Michael's body screamed for rest. His hands shook, his mind wandered, and his thoughts tangled into confusion. He thought he saw movement in the dark, but when he blinked, it was gone. Have you ever stayed awake so long that the world starts to look unreal? When every sound feels like a whisper from something watching you. That was the space Michael lived in now. Every minute stretched like an hour. Every breath felt heavier than the last. He tried to focus on the mission. The objective was simple: reach the extraction point at dawn. But dawn was still hours away. And in war, hours can feel like a lifetime. His body moved on instinct, driven by discipline and fear. But his mind? It was fading fast. He kept thinking about home, about his wife, Emily, and their newborn daughter he hadn't yet held. He'd promised he'd come back. He always did. But promises made in war are fragile things. They break easily under fire. When the wind picked up, carrying the faint echo of something metallic clinking in the distance, Davis lifted his weapon. "You hear that?" he whispered. Michael nodded, though he wasn't sure if he really did. Sleep deprivation was a cruel enemy. It made you doubt even your own senses. They waited in tense silence. Every second dragged. Michael could feel his heartbeat in his temples. His eyes burned, and for a moment they closed, just for a second. But in that second, he saw something. A face. A boy. Standing at the edge of the room. He jolted awake, rifle raised. Nothing. Just darkness. Lee flinched, panic flashing in his eyes. "Sir, what is it?" Michael didn't answer. How could he? How do you explain seeing ghosts when you're still alive? He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay grounded. "We move at first light," he said quietly. But deep down, he wondered if they'd make it that far. Outside, the sky was beginning to pale, not from dawn, but from the endless dust drifting across the horizon. Michael felt his body sway. His mind begged him to stop, to rest, to just close his eyes for a little while. But he knew what waited if he did. He glanced at the dog tags hanging around his neck, rubbing them between his fingers like a prayer. "Stay awake," he muttered. "Just stay awake." The first light of morning touched the edge of the desert, but for Michael, it didn't feel like a new day. It felt like the continuation of the same nightmare. And somewhere in that silence, he began to wonder, what happens to a soldier who's been awake too long? When even your own thoughts start to sound like someone else's voice? He didn't know yet. But over the next 48 hours, he was about to find out. Because the battle wasn't just against the enemy anymore. It was against himself. And the night wasn't over yet. Would you have survived 48 hours without sleep, with fear as your only companion? The sun clawed its way above the dunes, painting the ruins in a pale, merciless light. Sergeant Michael Cole squinted against it, his eyes red from strain. Dawn should have meant safety. But for him and the two men still breathing beside him, daylight only made them easier to see. Their water was gone. The rations were crumbs. Davis's lips were cracked, his skin pale under the dirt. Lee hadn't spoken since the night before. He just stared at the horizon, as if he could will rescue to appear. Michael checked his watch, though time had lost its meaning. He couldn't remember when he last blinked without forcing it. His brain pulsed with that strange hum, the sound of exhaustion taking over. Every heartbeat was a drum echoing inside his skull. They needed to move. The extraction point was 15 miles east, beyond a stretch of open desert where snipers were rumored to hide. The radio still hissed with static. No contact. No orders. Just the three of them, cut off and running on fumes. "Lee," Michael said, his voice gravel. "You good to walk?" Lee nodded, but the nod was empty, the kind of automatic movement that comes from survival instinct, not strength. Davis adjusted his gear, grunting. "We're running on nothing, Sarge." "I know," Michael said. "But stopping isn't an option." They stepped into the sunlight. The heat hit like a hammer, pressing down on them with every step. Sand clung to their boots. Their shadows stretched long, broken, wavering like ghosts walking beside them. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The desert blurred. At one point, Michael thought he heard someone calling his name. He turned, scanning the dunes, but no one was there. Just wind. Just the whisper of a mind that wanted to rest. He tried to keep his focus by talking to his men. "Remember the base coffee?" he asked suddenly. "That stuff could strip paint off a tank." Davis snorted weakly. "Yeah. I miss that sludge." Michael smiled faintly. "Guess it's the little things that keep us sane." But sanity was slipping fast. By noon, Lee stumbled and fell face first into the sand. Michael rushed to him, shaking his shoulder. "Private! Lee, stay with me!" Lee's eyes fluttered. I just need a minute, Sarge." "1 minute becomes forever out here," Michael said, voice sharp. "You get up, you keep moving." Lee tried, but his body refused. His hands sank into the hot ground. Davis looked away, defeated. "He can't do it. We need to rest." Michael wanted to argue, but his own knees were trembling. The logic inside him, the disciplined soldier, clashed with the exhausted human who could barely stand. He knew stopping meant danger, but pushing meant collapse. They found a patch of shade under a broken wall, the remains of an old outpost. Michael leaned against it, his head pounding. The world tilted. He could hear his pulse louder than the wind. He blinked hard, forcing his eyes to stay open. But when he looked again, he saw movement ahead, a figure walking toward them in the shimmer of heat. "You see that?" he whispered. Davis frowned. "See what?" "The man," Michael said. "Out there." Davis squinted. "There's no one there, Sarge." Michael stared. The figure was gone. Maybe it was never there. The heat, the sleeplessness, they were taking him apart piece by piece. He rubbed his temples. "We move again at sundown," he said quietly. "No matter what." Davis nodded, though both knew the truth. The desert was eating them alive. As the sun lowered, the temperature dropped, but the hallucinations grew sharper. Michael kept catching glimpses, faces in the dunes, hands reaching out, shapes that vanished when he blinked. He could almost hear voices whispering from the sand, soft and familiar. "Michael!" He froze. The voice was clear this time, a woman's voice. Emily's. His wife. He turned sharply, scanning the horizon, heart racing. Nothing. Just the cold wind curling around him. He knew it wasn't real. But knowing didn't help. By nightfall, Lee was barely conscious, and Davis's hands were shaking uncontrollably. Michael took the first watch, even though he hadn't slept in 2 days. His vision swayed, but he stayed upright, rifle ready. Every noise made him twitch. Every shadow looked alive. The hours dragged. He tried to count them, to measure the time until dawn. But time had stopped making sense. His thoughts tangled, his memories looped. He started to forget what day it was. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice asked, "How long can a man stay awake before he stops being himself?" And as Michael sat there, blinking against the dark, he realized something terrifying. He wasn't sure of who he was anymore. By the third day, Michael's body was no longer his own. His muscles ached, his mouth was dry, and his mind, once sharp and trained, felt like it was splitting in two. He had stopped feeling tired hours ago. Now he just felt detached, like he was watching himself from far away. Davis limped beside him, his boots dragging through the sand. Lee walked a few steps behind, his eyes glassy, staring at nothing. They had gone too long without rest, without food, without hope. Each step forward was an argument between the body and the will to survive. Michael's vision swam in and out of focus. He could feel the pulse in his temples, a steady drumbeat of exhaustion. He'd forgotten how many times he'd blinked and seen something that wasn't there, a figure in the distance, the shimmer of water, the outline of a truck that disappeared when he approached. Davis broke the silence. "Sarge, do you ever think we'll make it back?" His voice was cracked, barely human. Michael didn't answer right away. He looked at the endless stretch of sand, the sky wide and merciless above them. "We don't think," he said. "We move. Thinking gets you killed." Davis gave a dry laugh. "Feels like we're already half dead." They walked until the sun burned overhead. Michael tried to remember the sound of rain, the smell of home, Emily's voice. But memory was slippery now, every image fading at the edges. His brain was trying to dream while still awake. Suddenly, Lee stopped walking. His body swayed. Michael turned, catching him just before he fell face first into the sand. "Private!" he shouted. "Lee! Look at me!" Lee's eyes opened slightly, unfocused. I can't feel my hands." Michael pressed his fingers to Lee's neck, weak pulse, barely there. "We need water," he muttered. "Now." Davis shook his canteen upside down. Empty. Not even a drop. His voice cracked with frustration. "We should have turned back." "There is no back," Michael said firmly. "Only forward." He tore a strip from his sleeve, soaked it with the last bit of condensation from his pack, and pressed it to Lee's lips. The young soldier barely stirred. Michael looked at the horizon, squinting. In the distance, he thought he saw smoke. A faint column rising from behind the dunes. His pulse quickened. "There," he whispered. "There's something out there." Davis followed his gaze. "You sure it's not another mirage?" "Only one way to find out." They lifted Lee between them and started walking again. Step by step. Breath by breath. The desert was a cruel teacher. It stripped everything away until all that was left was willpower. Hours passed. The smoke grew closer. As they crested a hill, they saw the remains of a small supply truck, half buried in sand. The U.S. insignia still faintly visible. Michael almost laughed from disbelief. He rushed forward, prying open the back. Inside, old rations, cracked bottles, ammo crates, and one sealed water container. He didn't even think. He tore it open and poured it over Lee's lips. Lee gasped weakly. His eyes flickered open. For the first time in days, Michael felt something close to hope. "We're not done yet," he said. "You hear me? We're still in this." They shared sips, just enough to keep moving. The food was stale, but it tasted like heaven. For a few moments, the silence between them softened. Then, out of nowhere, a sound broke through the stillness, a faint rustle behind the truck. Michael froze. He raised his rifle. "Who's there?" he called out. No answer. Just wind. He stepped closer, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed that they weren't alone. The air felt heavier. A shape moved in the corner of his eye, a quick blur between the dunes. "Enemy scouts," Davis whispered. Michael scanned the horizon, but fatigue made the world swim. Shadows seemed to shift and breathe. He blinked hard, trying to focus, but it only made things worse. Was someone there? Or was it his mind again? His grip tightened on the rifle. We move! Now! They left the truck behind, pushing forward into the growing darkness. The wind howled, kicking up sand that stung their faces. Every sound became suspicious. Every whisper of wind turned into footsteps. Michael's nerves were on fire. He thought again of Emily, her voice echoing in his head. Come home, Michael! He wanted to answer her, to promise he would. But he couldn't tell if he was remembering or hallucinating. As the sun set, they reached a rocky ridge. Michael collapsed behind it, chest heaving. Davis sat beside him, silent, eyes distant. Lee was asleep, or unconscious, it was hard to tell. Michael stared at the horizon one more time. The light was fading. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. 2.5 days without sleep. He could feel something breaking inside him. And somewhere in that hollow silence, he realized, he wasn't fighting the war anymore. He was fighting time. And time was winning. Night fell like a curtain of black glass, sharp, endless, and filled with whispers that weren't really there. The wind had changed. It carried the sound of movement, but Michael couldn't tell if it came from the enemy, or from the tired rhythm of his own heartbeat echoing in his head. He sat with his back against the ridge, staring out into the dark. The stars above him blurred into streaks. He blinked hard, trying to clear them, but it only made the sky spin faster. His body was screaming for sleep. His brain begged for rest. But every time his eyes closed, the silence came alive. He could hear footsteps. He could feel eyes watching him. And each time he looked, nothing. Just the cold wind whispering through the rocks. Davis sat a few feet away, cleaning his rifle with shaking hands. You know what I miss, Sarge? He muttered. Michael didn't look at him. What? Music. Just hearing a song. Something that isn't the wind. Michael smiled faintly. I'd settle for a heartbeat that isn't mine. Davis chuckled once, then fell quiet again. Their voices faded into the emptiness. Behind them, Lee stirred, mumbling something in his sleep. Michael turned to check on him. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow. He looked like a ghost already halfway gone. Michael wanted to sleep, just a few minutes, but he couldn't risk it. Not yet. The enemy could be anywhere. The desert didn't forgive weakness. Hours crawled by. The line between night and morning blurred. Michael's mind started to drift in and out, flashes of memory, fragments of sound. He saw Emily again, standing in their kitchen, sunlight in her hair. She was smiling at him, holding a cup of coffee. You look tired, she said softly. I'm fine, he whispered back. Then why are you still out there? He blinked, and she was gone. A voice broke through the silence. Davis. Sarge, you good? Michael rubbed his eyes. Yeah. Just zoning out. You need rest. So do you. Davis laughed quietly. We all do. But rest is a luxury we can't afford. The conversation ended there, swallowed by the cold. Then, a crack. Sharp and sudden. A bullet hit the sand inches from Michael's boot. Another whizzed past his ear. Contact! He shouted, diving down. Davis rolled for cover, returning fire into the darkness. Muzzle flashes flickered in the distance, faint but real. Michael's heart pounded as adrenaline replaced exhaustion. He shouted orders on instinct, his voice steady even as his body trembled. Flank left! Keep low! He crawled through the sand, firing at the flashes. The air filled with dust and heat. The world shrank to the sound of gunfire and the smell of burning metal. When the shooting stopped, silence fell again, heavier this time. Davis peeked over the ridge. You think we got them? Michael didn't answer. His vision blurred, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Maybe, he said finally. He crawled to check on Lee, still breathing, still alive. Barely. Davis looked at him. How long have we been out here? Michael stared into the dark. Too long. He couldn't tell if it had been 2 days, or 3, or 10. Time was a flat circle now. Sleep deprivation had turned the minutes into endless echoes. He looked at his watch again. It was broken. The glass cracked. He couldn't remember when that happened. His head dropped against the rock. Just a few seconds, he thought. Just close your eyes for a moment. But the moment stretched. Suddenly, he was standing again, except he wasn't sure how. The desert looked different now. The air shimmered with strange colors. And there, a few feet away, stood a boy. Barefoot. Smiling. "Who are you?" Michael whispered. The boy tilted his head. "You forgot me, didn't you?" Michael's throat went dry. He knew that face. It was a boy from his old squad, Private Reynolds. Killed months ago. He took a step forward. "You're not real." The boy smiled wider. "Neither are you anymore." Then he vanished. Michael's chest tightened. He blinked, gasping, realizing he'd been standing in the open, no rifle, no cover, no sense of how long he'd been there. Davis's voice echoed faintly. "Sarge! Get down!" He dropped, bullets kicking up sand around him. Another attack. Real or imagined, he didn't know. He fired blindly into the dark. When the gunfire finally stopped, Davis was shouting. "We can't keep this up. We need sleep, or we're dead." Michael's breathing was ragged. "Sleep," he muttered. "Sleep is death." Davis grabbed his shoulder. "Then what's this, huh? You're not even here anymore." Michael shoved him away, his eyes wild. "I'm here," he snapped. "I'm here." The argument echoed into silence. Both men breathing hard. Both aware that their grip on reality was slipping. Michael turned his gaze to the horizon, where faint light was beginning to appear. Another dawn. Another fight. He whispered under his breath. 48 hours without sleep. How much longer can a man stay human? And as the first rays of morning cut through the haze, he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. The sun rose slow and heavy, like it too was exhausted from watching the night. Its light burned through the haze, revealing a wasteland of dust, twisted metal, and bodies half buried by wind. Michael blinked against the glare, squinting at the world that looked both familiar and unreal. His hands trembled as he reloaded his rifle. Each motion felt mechanical, not deliberate, just muscle memory. His mind was somewhere else, hovering between waking and dreaming. Davis was silent beside him, eyes red, movements sluggish. "You get any sleep?" Michael asked, even though he knew the answer. Davis gave a dry laugh. "Sleep? I forgot what that word means." Michael nodded, jaw tight. "We can't stay here. They'll come back. We need to move." Davis didn't argue, but his steps were unsteady as they packed up what little they had left. A few rounds of ammo, half a bottle of water, and a map so torn it was almost useless. The radio was dead. Their signal had gone out hours ago, or maybe days. Michael couldn't tell anymore. The last message they'd heard was a static-filled voice saying, "Hold position, reinforcements, soon." That soon had never come. As they moved through the desert, every step felt heavier. Michael could feel sleep pressing down on him, not like rest, but like a hand trying to drag him under. His vision flickered. The sand rippled like water. He saw movement, a figure in the distance. He raised his rifle. "Hold!" he whispered. 12 o'clock. Davis froze. "You see someone?" Michael squinted. The shape was small. Fragile. Not a soldier. Not carrying a weapon. It was a woman. Or it looked like one, standing still, staring at him. Her dress fluttered in the wind. Michael blinked, and she vanished. He rubbed his eyes hard. "I'm seeing things again." Davis's voice cracked. "You sure?" Michael didn't answer. He wasn't sure of anything anymore. They kept walking, each step slower than the last. Hours passed. The heat rose. The silence deepened. At one point, Davis stopped walking altogether. Sarge! I can't! My legs, they're done. Michael turned to him. Davis's eyes were hollow, face pale with exhaustion. Sit down, Michael said softly. 5 minutes. Davis slumped to the ground, clutching his helmet. You ever think maybe none of this is real? Michael frowned. What are you talking about? This desert. The fight. Us. What if we died back there, and this is just what comes after? Michael stared at him, unsure whether to argue or agree. The idea didn't sound as crazy as it should have. He crouched beside Davis. If this is hell, then we keep moving until it spits us out. Davis laughed weakly. Sounds like a plan, Sarge. Minutes bled into hours again. The horizon shimmered with heat. Michael's mind kept drifting. Every time he blinked, the world shifted, a flash of home, a sound of laughter, the smell of rain. He heard Emily's voice again, soft and close. You said you'd come home? He froze. Emily? No answer. Just the wind. He kept walking. His boots dragged through the sand. He wasn't sure if Davis was still behind him. The world had grown quiet again, too quiet. He turned. Davis? No reply. He called again, louder. Davis. Only the echo answered. Michael's stomach twisted. He ran back, scanning the ground, his pulse hammering. Then he saw it, Davis's rifle, lying half buried. No Davis. His throat tightened. No, 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 no. He looked around, spinning, searching for tracks. There were none. The desert had already swallowed every trace. He shouted until his voice cracked. Nothing. His mind spun in circles. He didn't know if Davis had wandered off, collapsed, or simply faded away like the others. He sank to his knees, clutching the rifle, whispering, You're not gone. You're just somewhere else. The wind answered with a hollow moan, carrying voices that weren't there. Michael forced himself to stand. He had to keep moving, not because he knew where he was going, but because stopping meant letting the exhaustion win. He stumbled forward, one step at a time, his thoughts unraveling like a thread pulled from fabric. The sun burned overhead. His shadow followed him, long and distorted. And in that shadow, he swore he saw someone walking beside him, tall, steady, wearing the same uniform. Davis? He whispered. The figure didn't answer, didn't even look at him. But it moved in perfect sync, step for step, until the world shimmered again, and it was gone. Michael pressed his hands to his face. Stay awake. Stay awake. But his body didn't listen. His eyes fluttered, his knees buckled. He fell into the sand, half conscious, half dreaming, caught between two worlds. And as he lay there, the line between real and unreal finally broke. He could hear distant gunfire. He could see faces, his men, alive again, laughing in the campfire glow. They were calling to him. Smiling. Come on, Sarge. It's over. You can rest now. He reached for them. But somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, No. Not yet. Because the mission wasn't over. Not until he knew what this endless night had been for. Michael gasped awake, his body shaking, heart pounding. He was still in the desert. Alone. The world around him silent and still. And in that silence, one truth echoed through his mind: sleep wasn't just the enemy now. It was the war itself. Michael's head throbbed with every heartbeat. The desert stretched endlessly, a cruel sea of sand and silence. His lips were cracked, his tongue heavy, and his thoughts scattered like ash in the wind. He didn't know how long he'd been walking anymore. Hours? Days? It all blurred together. Each time he blinked, the world flickered. Sometimes he saw the battlefield, torn earth, fire, men screaming. Other times he saw home, a kitchen light glowing, his wife's laughter, the sound of rain on the porch. The two worlds kept overlapping until he couldn't tell which one was real. He stopped walking. His knees buckled. He dropped to the sand and stared at the horizon, his chest heaving. The weight of the last 40 hours pressed down on him like a mountain. Every breath hurt. Every thought screamed for rest. But somewhere deep inside, a soldier's voice still whispered, "Don't you dare close your eyes." He took a slow breath. His hand drifted to his pocket and brushed against something hard, the photo of his squad, creased and worn. He pulled it out and stared at it. 7 faces? All gone now. Davis, Thompson, Reed, Harris, every one of them. And yet, when he looked closely, he saw something that made his stomach twist. The photo had changed. Or maybe his mind had. His own face, the one in the picture, looked older now. Tired. Like the man in the sand. He closed his eyes and pressed the photo to his chest. "You can't have me yet," he whispered. The wind shifted. It wasn't just wind this time, there was sound riding on it. Faint. Human. "Help!" Michael's eyes snapped open. He turned, scanning the empty dunes. "Who's there?" Nothing. Just the whisper of sand moving. Then, again, clearer this time. A weak, broken voice. "Help, please!" He gripped his rifle and stumbled toward the sound. His legs felt like they weren't part of him anymore. His body moved because his mind refused to stop. As he crested a ridge, he froze. Down below, half buried in the sand, was a man. A soldier. Enemy uniform. Barely alive. Michael hesitated. His first instinct screamed danger. The second, something deeper, whispered mercy. He slid down the dune, rifle ready. The man's eyes fluttered open, wide, terrified, but too weak to move. His lips trembled as he tried to speak, but the words came out in a language Michael didn't understand. Still, pain sounded the same in every tongue. Michael knelt beside him, scanning the man's wounds. A bullet through the shoulder. Dried blood. No supplies. No weapon. Just a dying man under the same burning sky. "You're not my enemy anymore," Michael muttered. He tore a strip from his sleeve and pressed it against the wound. The man winced but didn't fight. As he worked, Michael noticed something hanging around the man's neck. A small piece of metal glinting in the light. A dog tag. But not just any dog tag. Michael froze. His breath caught. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. The letters stamped into the metal were unmistakable. Michael T. Graves. His own name. His own serial number. His tag. He jerked back, heart pounding. What is this?" The man tried to speak, coughing, his fingers clutching at the tag. He offered it toward Michael, shaking. "Where did you get this?" Michael demanded, his voice rising. "Answer me!" The soldier's eyes filled with confusion. He whispered something faint, too soft to understand, before his head fell back into the sand. Michael sat frozen, staring at the tag. His mind spun in circles. It couldn't be real. It was impossible. He'd lost one of his tags months ago, but how could it end up here, in the hands of an enemy, in the middle of nowhere? He looked down at the man again. The stranger's eyes were still open, glassy, lifeless. Michael's stomach turned. He whispered, "Who are you?" The silence that followed was unbearable. He clenched the tag in his fist. The metal burned cold against his skin. "No," he muttered. "No, this isn't real. This is just sleep. This is the dream talking." But when he opened his hand, the tag was still there. Solid. Heavy. He pressed it against his chest, against the spot where his heartbeat struggled to keep time. That was when the wind picked up again, hard this time, carrying grit that stung his eyes. He looked up at the horizon. The sky was darkening fast, turning the color of bruised steel. A storm was coming. Michael staggered to his feet, every part of him screaming for rest, but the fear inside him burned hotter than fatigue now. He had to move. He stuffed the tag into his pocket, grabbed his rifle, and pushed forward into the storm. The sand lashed against him like shards of glass. The sky roared. The world blurred. He could barely see 5 feet ahead, But he kept walking, because stopping meant facing what he'd just seen. Somewhere in that storm, his own voice echoed back to him, warped, hollow, almost mocking. "You're not supposed to be here." He froze. "Who's there?" The echo came again, the same words, the same voice. His voice. He spun in circles, eyes wild. "Show yourself!" But there was nothing. Only wind. Only the sound of his own heart, or maybe another one, beating close beside it. He dropped to his knees again, clutching his head. "Get out of my mind," he whispered. "Just let me wake up." But no matter how hard he wished, the storm didn't fade. The world didn't shift. He was awake. And that meant the tag in his pocket, his own name, found in enemy hands, was terrifyingly real. Michael trudged through the storm, half blind, the sand slicing his face like knives. Every step was an argument between his body and his will. His legs wanted to collapse, but his mind refused. He couldn't stop now, not after what he had just seen. That tag in his pocket pulsed like a heartbeat. Every time he touched it, a wave of unease rolled through him. The storm finally broke hours later, leaving a suffocating stillness behind. The air was dry and heavy, and Michael could hear nothing but his own ragged breathing. He fell to his knees, coughing, his throat burning. When he lifted his head, he realized he wasn't alone. Ahead of him stood a cluster of burned-out buildings, what used to be a village, maybe. The walls were crumbling, the windows hollow. The place looked abandoned, forgotten. Yet something about it felt wrong, like it was waiting for him. He forced himself forward, rifle raised. The silence pressed in from all sides. Each doorway seemed to stare at him. A sign half buried in the sand bore faint lettering in another language. He didn't recognize the words, but the place felt familiar in a way that made his stomach twist. He entered what was left of a small house. Inside, everything was covered in dust and ash. A table. 2 chairs. A child's toy half melted by fire. He stepped carefully, his boots crunching on broken glass. Then he saw it, a wall covered in old papers, some of them photographs. He brushed the dust off one. His breath caught. It was his face. He stumbled back, nearly dropping his rifle. The picture was faded, creased, but unmistakable. His own eyes stared back at him. His name scrawled beneath it. And below that, a date, the date his unit went missing. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. No, that's not possible. He tore another paper from the wall. Another picture. His squad. The same 7 faces. But each one had a red X over it. All except his. His hands shook. His mind screamed at him to stop looking, but he couldn't. He flipped through the rest. Every single one was the same, his unit, their faces, their names. He backed up until his shoulders hit the wall. "How do they have these?" he whispered. "Who was here?" Then he heard it again, a faint sound, deep in the building. Footsteps. He froze, his grip tightening on the rifle. The steps grew louder. Slow, deliberate, scraping through the debris. He aimed toward the hallway. His finger hovered over the trigger. "Who's there?" he called. No answer. Only the creak of a door swinging open. He waited. The air felt electric, charged with tension. Then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Michael's heart nearly stopped. It was the soldier from the desert. The same man he tried to save. The one who'd been dead. The man stood there, eyes clear now, face unreadable. No wound. No blood. Just calm. Michael stumbled back, shaking his head. "You're dead. I buried you." The man raised a hand. "You shouldn't be here, Michael." The voice was quiet but steady. Familiar. Too familiar. Michael's breath caught. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head. "You already know." Michael's mind raced. The voice, it wasn't just familiar. It was his own. He lowered his rifle slowly, staring. "What is this?" he whispered. The figure stepped closer, the dim light catching his face. And for a split second, Michael saw it, his own reflection. His own eyes. "No, this place," the other Michael said, "is where you stopped fighting. The moment you let go." Michael shook his head violently. "No. I'm alive. I've been walking for days. 48 hours," the voice interrupted. "No sleep. No rest. You've been living between worlds. You think this is survival. But this," he gestured to the broken walls, "this is memory." Michael clutched the dog tag in his pocket. It burned against his skin. "Then what's this?" he shouted. "Why did I find my own tag?" The figure smiled faintly. "Because it was never lost." Michael stared at him, chest heaving, trying to make sense of the madness. "If this is memory," he said slowly, "then why can I still feel the sand, the pain, the hunger?" "Because you're not ready to let it go," the other Michael said softly. "You're fighting yourself." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was unbearable. Then Michael whispered, "If I stop fighting, what happens?" The other Michael's eyes softened. "You rest." Michael swallowed hard. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He wanted to believe this wasn't real. But deep down, he knew something inside him had broken long ago. He looked down at the photo of his squad still clutched in his hand. The faces of men he couldn't save. The guilt he'd carried like armor. Tears blurred his vision. "I can't leave them." "You already did," his reflection said quietly. "You've just never forgiven yourself." Michael dropped to his knees, shaking. The wind outside had gone still again, leaving only the echo of his own breath. He stared at the tag, at his name engraved in steel, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a reminder of life. It felt like a message from the end. The other Michael crouched in front of him. "You've carried this weight long enough. You can put it down." Michael looked up slowly, meeting his own eyes. "And if I do? Then you wake up." Michael's lips trembled. "Wake up where?" The reflection smiled faintly. "Where you were always meant to be." The world around them began to flicker, like the air itself was unraveling. The walls of the ruined house shimmered, the photos curling into light. Michael felt everything slipping away, the sand, the pain, the exhaustion. He clutched the tag one last time. "Tell them I tried," he whispered. The other Michael nodded. "They know." And then everything went silent. The wind carried a strange calm over the desert that morning, as if the world had finally taken a breath after holding it for too long. The sun rose weakly through the haze, painting the horizon in dull gold. Somewhere, half buried beneath the sand, Michael's footprints ended. Days later, a search team from his unit arrived, guided by fading radio signals and faint traces of movement. They had been sent to recover what was left of the last patrol, the one Michael had been part of. The team moved cautiously, their boots crunching over dry earth, scanning for signs of life. "Over here," one of them called. They found a collapsed shelter, partly covered by drifted sand. Inside, in the shadows, lay a single figure. He was sitting upright, leaning against the wall, head bowed slightly forward as if he had fallen asleep. His rifle rested beside him. In his hand he held a dog tag. The medic stepped closer, kneeling down. He brushed the dust from the man's sleeve. The uniform was torn and sun-bleached. The face, though calm and peaceful, was unmistakable. It was Captain Michael Hayes. The medic's breath caught as he turned the dog tag in the soldier's palm. The name engraved on it matched the one on his uniform. It was his own tag. The others gathered in silence, removing their helmets. None of them spoke. They buried him there, beneath the open sky he had fought under. No words, no speeches, just a quiet moment of respect for a man who had pushed past every human limit. As they placed the final stones over the mound, one of the soldiers whispered, "He didn't give up. He just went farther than anyone else." Back at base, his journal was found. Most of it was barely legible, written in uneven lines as if his hands had been shaking. But one page stood out, clear and steady, as if he had written it in complete peace. It read, 48 hours without sleep. 48 hours of noise, pain, and ghosts. I don't know if this is real anymore, but I've seen what happens when a man refuses to quit. I've learned that survival isn't about staying alive, it's about remembering why you want to. If someone finds this, tell them I wasn't afraid. I was just tired. And now, I can finally rest. Weeks passed. The war moved on. But among those who'd known Michael, his story became something more than a tragedy. It became a legend whispered in the camps, told quietly around fires. A reminder of what it means to keep walking even when the world stops moving. Some said they still saw him in the distance sometimes, walking along the horizon at dusk, head held high, boots heavy but steady. Maybe it was just a story soldiers told to make the nights easier. Or maybe it was something else. Because somewhere, beneath the endless desert sky, a man who hadn't slept in 48 hours finally found his peace. And for those who still fight, still march, still wake in the silence between heartbeats, his story whispers the same truth: even the strongest hearts need to rest. But what matters is that they never stopped beating. If you're still listening, still breathing, still carrying your own battles, you're already winning the hardest war of all. And that is what he would have wanted you to remember.